There are a number of, as it's well known, a number of well-known I am statements. The famous one, I am the bread of life, I am the light of the world, and so on, where Jesus identifies himself. And then there are those other ones where he simply says, I am he. Unfortunately, the public is subjected to a fair degree of obfuscation and muddle when translators fail to add the word he there. And so we need to establish initially, what does Jesus mean when he says, I am, ego eimi, and I'm using the modern Greek pronunciation here. We establish this fact easily from the fact that in chapter 4, verse 26, it's quite clear that Jesus is saying, I am the Messiah. The story there is very clear. The lady from Samaria is interested in the Messiah. She knows that when Messiah comes, he will have answers to all difficult questions. So with that in view, Jesus then, having heard her remarks about the Messiah and the hope of his coming, simply looks her in the eye and says, I who am speaking to you am he. Am who? The Messiah. The context is quite clear. The statement, I am, ego eimi, I am he, as put into proper English, I am he, I am the one, in that context plainly means I am the Messiah of Israel. It does not mean I am God. So with that point established, we then turn to the other I am he statements in John, and we find, for instance, that unless you believe that Jesus is the Messiah, that's to say, I am he, we know already now from 4:26 that the I am he means I'm the Messiah. Unless you believe that Jesus is the Messiah, you are not pleasing to God. This is the constant message of the entire New Testament, repeated frequently, of course, in the Epistle of John also. So what about the one then in John 8:58, where Jesus says, before Abraham came to be, I am he. Well, I am the Messiah. And one can argue that before Abraham began to exist, Jesus is the predicted Messiah. No question about that. But there's an interesting ambiguity in the Greek of John 8:58. And we do remember that Jesus is often at cross purposes with those who are so hostile to his own thinking. It is a grand mistake to side with the hostile Jews and agree with them against Jesus. When, for example, the Jews complain that he's claiming to make himself a God or God, whatever it is, he's claiming, they maintain, to have the position of divinity in some sense. Jesus refutes that flat out. He does not agree with the Jews. The interesting thing is that evangelicals tend to agree with hostile Jews here and side with hostile Jews against Jesus. That's a mistake. Jesus goes on in one of these passages in John 10 to say that even the judges were called gods, Elohim. So why is this so wrong that he, being the unique agent and commissioned servant of God, that he, Jesus, calls himself the Son of God? Well, everybody knew that the Son of God was not God. That was just plain. Israel had been called the Son of God. Adam was the Son of God. So that put to rest any false notion that he's claiming to be Yahweh, to be exactly the same as Yahweh in some extraordinary sense. No. Now he does claim, uniquely and extraordinarily, that he's on a par with Yahweh. What he says are the words of Yahweh. He's speaking as Yahweh's perfect agent, insomuch that if you've seen Jesus, you've seen God. If you've seen Jesus, you've seen the Father, seen and heard the Father. Well, of course, because the agent speaks perfectly for his sponsor. That's not a problem. But that certainly is not a claim to be God, as we would put it in our modern English. Commentators on the book of John frequently note a certain ambiguity in the sayings of Jesus, especially in connection with the failure of the hostile Jewish audience to grasp what Jesus actually meant. Orthodoxy, evangelicalism particularly, is often keen to side with the opinions of the Jews against Jesus. That has to be wrong. It's an elementary fact, and now I'm going to talk about John 8:58 specifically. It's an elementary fact of language that a Greek aorist infinitive takes its meaning from the context. It may refer to events, future, or past. Let me give you some examples. Matthew writes, before the cock will have crowed, and we have their prin before, and the aorist infinitive. But earlier in the same Gospel of Matthew, we have before they came together, past tense. But again, we have prin and the aorist infinitive. In John's Gospel, we have, Sir, come down before my child dies. That's John 4:49. Again, prin plus the aorist infinitive. And then we have, I have told you before it comes to pass, in John 14:29. Prin plus the aorist infinitive. The question arises then, what is the proper rendering into English of John 8:58? Did Jesus say, in fact, before Abraham comes to be, i.e. returns to life in the resurrection, I am he? Or did he say, before Abraham came to be, came into existence, was born, I am he? Which is it? It's a fair question. One could argue for either one. Let's take the view that he's speaking here about the resurrection. The argument in this context goes like this. The Jews say, you're making yourself greater than Abraham. Well, Jesus certainly was claiming to be greater than Abraham. There's no question about that. And he can affirm that very nicely here in the statement, let me assure you that before Abraham comes to be in that future resurrection, comes into existence again after sleeping the sleep of death, in the future resurrection, I am he. I'm the Messiah and I'm alive. Because Jesus, as we all know, precedes Abraham in the resurrection. He is the only human being yet to have been immortalized by resurrection. Abraham has yet to be immortalized in the resurrection, the single resurrection which will occur at the beginning of the millennium when Christ returns. A single event, by the way, no pre-tribulation rapture. Of course, a single future return of Jesus to raise the dead of all the ages and to begin to rule with them in that first stage of the kingdom, which is the millennium. So I leave you with those thoughts. Look carefully at that construction with prin in the Greek and the aorist infinitive. Look at it in Matthew, look at it in John, and you'll see a very nice sort of thing that linguists love, a nice ambiguity which should be examined.